Have you ever wondered how to build a mobile app, how to coordinate the graphics and code to create a character that jumps around the screen? Today I'll show you the first steps in building a screen scroller app on Solar 2D. Solar 2D is a real easy language to learn, similar to C++. I was able to teach it to myself without a computer science background. All of the graphics I'm using were purchased from graphicriver.net. Here you can find cheap, game-ready assets, like this one, a sprite sheet of a character named Wukong. I will post a link down below of the artwork I will be using. The first step in building a screen scroller app is to create a character, background, and I'll define some global variables like the center of the screen and its width and height. The first step will always be the most basic, but it at least makes the game something more than a blank screen. Here I want to create a class for my character Wukong, as well as call it in the main function. This, however, will not display anything because there's no code using the display objects. I'll change this by creating a method that displays a sprite sheet of my character. Initially, I set the animation time to 1 second or 1000 milliseconds to complete one cycle of the sprite sheet. This parameter can be changed to any amount of time. For example, here I changed it to half a second or 500 milliseconds. As you can see, he's running way faster. It could also be changed to 2 seconds to complete one cycle of the sprite sheet. Now, the main character is still running on a black background. I want to change this by creating a new class called background. In this class, I will display new images that do not interact with our main character. In the first clip, Wukong is running on one of the backgrounds. I can change the method being called in the main function and display a new background. Here we can see he's running on a background with water. Now that we have a character and background, I want the game to feel more alive. A physics simulation is a great way to do this. First, I will acquire the physics library, start the simulation, and I'll change up the gravity. I will also create a new class called GameMap that contains objects in the physics simulation that interact with Wukong. Here I can add a platform across the bottom of the screen. A static object is the ideal type for any floor or wall because they do not move from a collision event. As we can see, there is now a platform across the bottom. Next, Wukong needs to be added to the physics simulation. He will be a dynamic object, allowing him to move around and experience the effects of forces. The bounce will be set to 0, and now a very large Wukong will be running on a very small platform. Another line of code was added to scale down his size. Here, a small Wukong falls in and runs in thin air. Again, he falls in with a smaller gravity and runs at the same height. Why does this happen? The physics simulation detects collisions off the edge of the original image, not the scaled size. One way to fix this is to change the size of the original image. Here I scaled down the width and height to a quarter of the original size. Now I want to change some of the parameters in the sprite sheet, such as the name, width, and height. And when I run the simulation again, he falls in, and perfect, he's running on the ground. Another way to change the image size is by opening up the config.lua file and changing the number of pixels that make up the width and height of a screen. The smaller amount of pixels means an image will take up a larger amount on the screen. As we can see with the 480 by 720, he's even smaller, and with 640 by 960, he's even smaller. Right now, we have a character that walks and doesn't move. I want to change this up by adding 2 more rows into our sprite sheet. The first row would be of our character jumping, while the second row would be of our character idling. I also have to add these sequences into the code. Here I can change up the parameters for each sequence, such as the time and the number of frames in the sequence. I'll change up the name of the sprite sheet, and I'll change up the total number of frames there are. I'll set the new sequence into idling, and please ignore my bad spelling. And when I run the simulation, we have Wukong idling. I could also change this to have a jumping animation. Sprite sheets are done. Next thing I want to do is create event listeners that move Wukong when they are clicked. I will have to create a line of code within the main function that will call this method, and I'll also create a menu group that contains all of the objects with event listeners. Next thing I want to do is create the event, so when this event is clicked, a function would be called. I'll also give Wukong the name of self.mainGuy and set him a velocity of 1/10 the width of the screen, so when something is clicked, he would start moving. Now we can see there's a white rectangle on the screen, and when there is a click, he starts moving towards the click. This line of code is far from perfect, but it is still a good start. Next thing I want to do is add in a line of code to stop him when the click is released. And this other 2 lines of code is to make him face the correct direction, the direction he is walking. And now when the simulation is run, we would have the white rectangle removed. And when there's a click, he starts walking in that direction. He also faces the direction he is going and stops when the click is released. This is much better. He can walk, now let's make him jump. I'll add in a similar block of code to what made him walk. Here we have a yellow rectangle at the top of the screen that has its own event listener, the jump EV. When the yellow rectangle is clicked, Wukong will jump towards the click, fall back down, hold the pose, and venture off the screen. I'm going to add in a collision event listener that tells Wukong that once he hits the ground in a jumping pose, he will need to switch his pose to idling and stop moving. Now when he jumps, he goes in the air, holds the pose, falls back down, and switches to idling and stops. This works perfectly. We already have one type of platform for Wukong to walk on. Next, I want to create a floating platform for him to jump on. I'll add this line of code in the main function that will be called to create this platform. As we can see here, Wukong could jump onto the platform. He could also jump off of the platform. Or he could even slowly run into the platform. At least very close to it, because there's this transparent layer between him and the platform. So why does it exist? Well, I'll pull up one individual image from the walking sprite sheet, and as we can see here, there's this transparent section on both sides of the image. The collision event is detected by the right side of the image, marked by this red line. However, we want the collision to be detected marked by this green line, marking the edge of his picture. When I import an image from the jumping sprite sheet, you can see it goes all the way to the right edge of the image. Point being, all the images within the same sprite sheet need to be the same size. As you can see within the sprite sheet, all of the images are in nice orderly rows and columns due to the fact the image is the same size. Even though there are images within the sprite sheet where the character is leaning further forward than others, it is important to make these images the same size by using a transparent section. So, the transparent part is unavoidable. How do we remove it from the game? I'm going to add in a new chunk of code that creates a square within the physics simulation. I'm also going to remove Wukong from the physics simulation. Instead, he is just going to be a sprite sheet that follows around the square using a runtime event listener. Now I also need to change any line of code that relates Wukong and the physics simulation. This will now have to become something that relates the square to the physics simulation. There is a lot here, so hopefully I don't miss anything. Now that this is all done, I'm going to rerun the simulation and see how it looks. As we can see, Wukong runs towards the platform and the space is no longer there. Now, the code is not perfect. As we can see here, the square rotates as he falls off the platform, resulting in him standing beneath the platform. Luckily, this is a quick fix where all I have to do is increase the angular damping to a very large number. Now when he falls off the platform, the square does not rotate and he stands up correctly. Perfect. One last thing I want to add in is a trophy. This will be a sensor object, meaning it does not feel the effects of forces, but it does detect collisions. I'm also going to add in a couple more lines of code into the main function that create more platforms and a trophy in the simulation. Now, the square not Wukong, the square needs to be able to detect collision events and know what to do when he hits the trophy. I added in a new collision event, as well as a new sequence in Wukong's sprite sheet called Selly. Once the square hits the trophy, Wukong will celebrate. As we could see here, Wukong can now walk, jump onto a platform, and jump onto the next platform, walk off and fall to the ground, and go hit the trophy and celebrate once he does so. Thanks for tuning into the video. Hopefully you found the video insightful and entertaining. This will be my first video of a series on building a screen scroller mobile app. Please like the video, subscribe, and tune back in if you want to see more on building apps. See you later.